Hello, Jeff Zwarenk here. Welcome to Give and Take, the segment of our show where we explore important scientific ideas to help you be more confident in the truth of Christianity. Today, I'm joined by founder and president of Reasons to Believe, Dr. Hugh Ross, and we're going to talk about whether the sun is special or not. Hugh, it's good to have you here today.
Well, thank you.
So, Hugh, there's lots of stars out in the universe. We've got one at the center of our solar system. When you look at the number of stars out there, is our star unique when you look at its mass, its age, its luminosity, those sorts of things?
Well, I mean, you got stars of all different masses and ages, and you had to find a star that is exactly the mass of our star, the sun, exactly the same age, exactly the same composition. This is where it shows up unique, but that's not surprising because looking at a very wide range of possible values.
So it sounds like, the sun kind of sits or within the distribution of what you would expect out there. And obviously, the more you push on the precision or the accuracy, you're going to find it more and more unique. But so you make an argument that our sun is unique. And I think that has to do with the variability. So kind of talk about some of the ways that stars are variable and why we'll explore why that's important for life here on Earth.
Well, the age of a star and the mass of a star are very important to determine how much flaring activity you get and how stable the luminosity of the star is. In our star, the sun happens to be almost exactly halfway through its nuclear burning, and that's when it's most stable. It's also got the best possible mass for stability. But I think what's exciting is astronomers have been using the Kepler and the Gaia spacecraft to collect data from stars that are very close to having the sun's characteristics, especially its age and mass, and then in detail comparing the variability and the flaring activity with respect to the sun.
So with that variability, we've got two different kinds of variability, presumably. One is where the actual brightness of the star goes up and down over some period of time. And then also where, sun has flares where it gives off brief bursts of things that make it brighter. So kind of what is the data that Kepler is bringing in? What does it have to say about the flaring activity? Kind of let's dig into that. What sorts of flares do we see from our star, and what do we see from the Kepler data?
Well, what we're noticing is that our star does have flares, like all stars do, but our flares are tiny and infrequent. Whereas what we're seeing with the most sun-like stars being observed by Kepler and Gaia is they have many more flares going on, and the flares are much more active than what we see in our sun.
So let's go on to the sun. What's one of the larger flares that we've seen? What did it do? Kind of tell us about that. I think I know one of them is called the Carrington event. Let's talk about that one specifically.
That happened in 1859. It's the biggest solar flare that's happened in the era where we had instruments to actually record what was going on. And it was sufficiently active that it knocked out telegraph systems around the world. I mean, we had telegraph operators getting electric shocks as a result of this flare. Today, it'd be much more destructive because we now have instrumentation that really do depend on our electromagnetic activities being much more stable.
Yeah, I mean, I even recall reading that they were sending telegraphs across the Atlantic Ocean, and so that's a fair amount of power you have to push through to drive a signal that far. That they actually disconnected the telegraph from the batteries, and there was enough power coming into the system from the flare itself to drive the telegraph. So that's a pretty remarkable amount of power coming in from a flare. Yet you're saying this is small compared to what we see out there.
Yeah, this study basically what we call super flares. Super flares are flares from stars that are intense enough that they happen in our sun. It would literally be the end of human civilization. And so we get small flares. Sun-like stars get really big flares, and they don't get them just like once every 20,000 years. They're getting them on an order of once a century or two.
So kind of, if you could just put that into context with this Carrington event. We saw that roughly 100 years ago. How much brighter are they than the Carrington event, and how much more frequently do they happen than something like that?
Well, we're talking about a factor of 100 times more intense than the Carrington event. That's enough where it's going to not only damage our technology and civilization, it's going to impact your crop productivity. So you're not going to have the food that you normally eat, and it will impact our health as well.
So let's explore that a little bit, kind of for the last couple of minutes here. It seems to me, obviously we had the Carrington event, and had we not had telegraphs, we probably wouldn't even known about it. So
Right.
when you're talking about these solar flares, are they damaging to life here on Earth, or are they damaging to our civilization that we have, or both?
Well, as long as we get nothing more substantial than the Carrington event, it may impact our civilization or technology. It'll have no impact on our health. It'll have no impact on our crop productivity. But boost that up by a factor of 10 or 100 times, then it definitely would. And here on Earth, that only happens about once every 30,000 years. Whereas with the most sun-like stars we're observing, we're seeing events like that happening about once a century, in some cases, once every few years.
Obviously, if the Carrington event happened today, it would impact GPS, it would impact our cell phones, lots of things related to our civilization. But you're saying that this even impacts life itself, the crops. How exactly does that play out? What's the mechanism by which the damage occurs there?
Well, we're talking about more ultraviolet radiation coming in for a brief moment, and that will impact the ozone shield, which could cause crop damage.
Okay, and so obviously this increased flaring activity is detrimental to life, but you've also mentioned that a lot of these other stars, in the article that we'll reference in a minute here, a lot of these other stars also have variability in their brightness. Explain how our sun fits into that picture. How calm is our star compared to the other stars that are out there?
Well, that was the surprise of this discovery. I mean, astronomers were already anticipating that our star would be special and having very calm flaring activity. But I think what really surprised them, our star is special in another way, in that its luminosity is extremely stable. It was more than 5 times more stable than we see in the most solar-like stars. Which actually has a factor in explaining, for example, why our climate is as stable as it is. We're not dealing with the solar luminosity variability that we see typical in the most sun-like stars.
I think that's a pretty important point, that we're not just looking out at all stars out there. We're looking at stars that have ages and luminosities and rotations that are similar to our sun, yet we're seeing this great increase in variability. That really does seem to indicate there's something pretty special about our sun.
Yeah, a factor of 5 is not trivial. And so I think it gives us more appreciation about just how blessed we are to have this very stable sun so we can have this advanced civilization here on Earth.
Well, thank you very much for your comments, Hugh. I really appreciate it. There is this common tendency to think that our solar system and the Earth are just kind of run-of-the-mill or ordinary when we look out in the cosmos. But more and more, we're finding that Earth and the solar system look unique in their capacity to support life. And one way is in how stable our sun is and how much that helps support not just life on Earth, but particularly advanced civilization. I would encourage you to go to reasons.org and find Hugh's article about this. It's called "A Dull Star is Necessary for a Great Party." Check it out. You'll get great information that will equip you to go share just how remarkable our solar system is, how it supports life to those you encounter.
That does it for us this week on 2819. We hope you enjoyed this episode and that you're ready to read some more Spider-Man comics.
And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We are at 2819 Show, and also subscribe to the show.
And if you want the audio version, you can get it on most major podcast services. Just search Reasons to Believe Podcast.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.